Hi, I'm Sharon Sobel. This is my model, Ankita Ashrit. We are in the makeup studio of Weber Fine Arts Building at University of Nebraska at Omaha. Today we will be demonstrating makeup techniques for creating a wider, rounder look on Ankita's face. We'll be focusing on manipulating the bone structure and the cartilage and the subcutaneous fat. Now, Ankita has already washed her face and applied moisturizer, which you always want to do before you apply makeup. I've applied her base. Before that, though, I have washed my hands with antibacterial soap. It's very important when you apply your makeup to make sure that your hands are clean. Also, it's important if you have acne or any problems with your skin that you check with a dermatologist before using any cosmetics or theatrical makeup. Okay, so now we're going to begin by widening Ankita's forehead. We're going to manipulate the bone structure by making it appear wider. Usually, when you apply highlight and shadow to your forehead to give a regular contouring, you apply the highlight on the ridges of the forehead, but you stop at the arch of the eyebrow. That's a natural place to notice where to stop. Because we want to make Ankita's forehead look wider, what we're going to do is we're going to apply the highlight beyond the points of the eyebrow. We're also going to apply it as close to her hairline as possible because she has a very low forehead. If you have a very high forehead, you're going to want to apply the makeup a little bit lower. So let's start with the highlight. And as I mentioned, instead of starting at this point, we're going to start a little further out onto the temples. Now you follow the shape of the ridges of the forehead, and they're in a somewhat bow shape. If you need to refill your brush, make sure that you don't have any start and stop lines. And if you have little hairs on your forehead, just work underneath them. And here we are extending beyond, and on this side we're extending beyond. Now before I put the other line of highlight on her lower brow bone, I want to make sure I leave enough room in between so that we have room for her shadow. So again, I'm going to start beyond the arch of the eyebrow. I'm going to follow the shape of the ridge, and we're going to continue beyond the angle of the eyebrow. So here we have the highlight and the shadow. The next thing I'm going to do is put on the shadow. Before I do that, I need to clean off my brush. You want to have a clean brush every time you put on a new makeup color. You don't want to get your highlight and shadow blended together because they look muddy, and sometimes a sort of purplish color will happen, and you really don't want that on your face. So now I'm going to look for the deepest part of the forehead, and using the side of, or the narrow side of my brush, I'm going to lay in a line of shadow. If you make a little mark and add a little makeup where you don't want it, you can use your latex-free sponge to wipe things off. I always think of it like an eraser. So we've got the shadow in between. You'll notice I've left some foundation in between so we have room to blend. Now the next place we're going to put the shadow is on the temples of Ankita's forehead. And you can see that we're going to start quite far back, right above the cheekbone. Try not to get it onto the cheekbone. So we have this temple here, and we're going to apply makeup on this temple here. And here we have the highlight and then the shadow. After I wash off or clean off my brush, what I want to do is start by blending the highlights. Now, when I talk about blending, I don't mean wiping all of the makeup off. I want to wipe the edges of the makeup off so that they blend into the foundation color. Sometimes you need to use your sponge if you get makeup in the wrong place. So I'm going to hang on to that, and I'm going to blend the outer edges. Now blending, which I have mentioned in the other tutorials, is an art, and you want to make sure that you blend in the direction in which you applied the makeup. You don't want to blend across the direction. That will give you a very scrubby, painterly look. We want a very smooth look. So as I contour and blend, I'm going on the outer edge of both the upper and lower edges of her highlight. And we're just making sure that both of them are nicely blended. Now I'm going to clean off my brush once again, and we're going to blend the shadows. The center shadow is rather narrow, so I might end up using my brush over the entire thing, but I really want to keep it darkest in the center and blend the edges out to her foundation base color. I'm wiping off a little of the highlight because it still seems a little bit too high. Now I'm going to blend the shadow. Again, I'm blending in the direction in which I applied. We're going to turn her forehead, and we're going to blend in the direction in which we applied. And here we have a very lightly blended contour of the forehead, which makes it look wider. Next, we're going to work on creating rounded apple cheeks. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to ask Aunt Kita to smile really hard with her teeth showing, and we're going to look for the roundness that's created by that smile. I'm going to use one of my fingertips to get some highlight on it, and I'm going to look for the highest, most protruding part of her cheek, and I'm going to put a little dot of highlight right there. Now, Aunt Kita is going to relax her face, and we're going to look and see if that's the spot we want. And actually, that looks pretty good to me. If you'd smile again, I think I put on just a little bit too much, so I'm going to use my non-latex sponge, and I'm just going to wipe away a little bit of this area. And there we have a nice dot of highlight. The next thing we're going to do is create an arc of shadow which will support the highlight. So I will ask Aunt Kita to once again smile hard, and you can see the shadow right here under that area. So now I'm going to take up a little of my shadow color, and I am going to paint around the arc. Now if you'll relax your face, you can see it almost looks sort of like a marionette cheek. And we want to make sure that we don't go too far into the upper lip area. We're actually contouring around the nasolabial fold, which we'll talk more about in the old age tutorial. So right now I have a narrow edge, narrow corner that's going into a fuller area, back into a very narrow corner, and we have an arc on her cheek. The next thing we want to do is blend. So I'm going to be blending the highlight. I'm going to use my finger to blend it. It's very difficult to blend a rounded area with a brush. Some people can do it, but I like to use my finger. And as I mentioned before with blending, I'm blending the outer edge. Notice how I'm leaving a really bright spot of white in the middle. We're going to powder anyway, so that'll get taken down, but having that bright spot will give you the most protruding area and the most roundness on the cheek. And you can see I'm very lightly blending. Now I'm going to use my brush, and I've cleaned it off, and we're going to blend. And I'm blending the outer edge, or rather the inner edge, which is closest to the highlight. And because I don't want a sharp edge, I'm now going to blend the lower edge down into her foundation color. Now, if you're making the face look quite wide, you're not going to add cheekbones. So right now we're just going to focus on the round apple cheek. And here we have a rounded apple cheek. And if you smile for us, you can see it's in the right place. And if you stop smiling, you can see that it's going to look round whether she's smiling or not. During a brief break, I painted makeup onto Aunt Kita's other cheek to make it match the one I did on camera. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on her nose. We want to make the nose look both wider and rounder and shorter. So we're going to focus on two different techniques. One is manipulating the bone structure. We want to make the bridge of her nose look shorter and wider. So we're going to start our highlight not up between the eyebrows, but actually lower down after it's curved into the face. I'm using my wide brush to apply a swath of makeup, and I'm going to stop it before it gets to the ball of the nose. And here I'm painting it on wider than I would ordinarily do for a basic corrective makeup. The next thing we're going to do is put on the shadow. And since we have painted on a wide swath of the highlight, we must start the shadow further out. And again, as we always do, we're leaving an area of foundation in between. So I'm painting in a little bit of shadow on one side. She's going to turn her head, and I will evenly paint a little bit of shadow on the other side. Now we will blend the highlight using a clean brush. We're blending the sides. We're going to leave the strongest amount of highlight in the center of the nose, right down the center, so that will stand out. We're going to turn her face, and we're going to blend the other side. Now, if the top and bottom edge aren't even, you can take your non-latex sponge and just wipe off a little bit, and then blend it out down to the foundation color. I'm going to clean off my brush, and I'm blending the shadow, following around the nair of the nose and blending it out. I need to make sure that I very carefully do not bring the shadow onto that nice apple cheek that we just painted on. And I will blend the other side, again being very careful of the apple cheek. So now we have a wider area on the bone structure, but we also want to make the tip of the nose look rounder. So we're going to use the same technique we used on the cheeks. I'm going to use the pad of my finger to pick up a little bit of highlight, and I'm going to find the tip of the nose and put a little highlight right in the center. Then I'm going to use my brush to draw an arc of shadow. The shadow supports the highlight, and I'm drawing an arc around the lower part of the ball of the nose. And you can see it's already starting to define roundness. So this is a very small area. I'm going to be very careful using my fingertip to blend the outer edges. I might also take one of my very small brushes, and this will help me shadow, or blend rather, the highlight around the nose. And then I can go back with my shadow and blend the inner edge and the outer edge. Now this gives a roundness to the nose, but there's one more thing we can do to make it look even wider. The nairs of the nose can give us an opportunity to create a little bit of highlight, and this will bring the audience's eye outward on the face. And it will really accentuate the width of the nose. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean off my brush, since I've been using some shadow, and I'm just going to blend out the outer edges of that highlight. And again, what that does is it will trick the audience into thinking that this is a very wide nose. And here we have a rounded, widened nose. The next thing we're going to do is make Ankita's chin look very round, and we're also going to create the look of double chins, which would happen when you're extremely heavy. So first I'm going to ask Ankita to pull her chin down and inward. You can see it's creating what looks like a double chin. Now this is just her skin, but we can accentuate this to really look like a double chin. The first thing we're going to do is using the same technique we've used on the cheeks and on the nose. We're going to find the highest point of her chin and put a dot of highlight. The next thing we're going to highlight is this roll of flesh that has happened from her pulling her chin back. So I'm going to start all the way back near her jawline. We're going to paint the makeup right on the skin. I'm going to turn Ankita so I can see her a little bit better. And we are going to also paint this other side and have it meet in the middle. Now looking from the front, even before we put on the shadow, you can already start to see how the flesh under her chin is starting to protrude. So we're done with the highlight. I've cleaned off my brush. We're going to start with the shadow. We're going to put an arc of shadow under her chin, and you can see, and I'll just turn her a little bit more, you can see where the line or the crease is under her chin. And this is the place where we want to put the shadow. We also want to support the lower highlight, so we're going to paint on some shadow beneath that. And even before we've blended it, you can see that we're getting a roundness. So I'm cleaning off my brush so that I'm ready to blend the highlight when I get to the lower part, but for now I'm using my finger on the jawline or below the jawline where we have the double chin. We're now blending out the upper and lower edges, and once again I'm blending in the direction in which I applied the highlight. I'm going to turn Ankita a little bit so you can see her on the other side. And we are blending the highlight so we have a nice blend between the highlight and the skin tone. Now while she's sitting this way, I'm going to clean off my brush and I'm going to blend the shadow both up and down from the crease and both up and down under the double chin. I might even bring this shadow line a little bit higher just to really accentuate it. I'm going to turn Ankita again so we can see the other side. And here we are blending right below the chin and blending right below her second chin. I think I'm going to blend her highlight a little bit more since I'm not satisfied. And you can go back and forth between the highlight and shadow as long as you clean off your brush in between. Now, Ankita's going to sit here for a second with her chin pulled back, and you can see the double chin effect. Now she's going to relax her chin, and it's not going to be as noticeable, but it will at least give a semblance of the roundness. If you really want something realistic and you're not wearing a high collar, you might need to use a prosthetic, but if you want to just add a little bit of fullness, using the highlight and shadow will really help you give that effect of a round chin and a double chin. The last thing we're going to do with Ankita is to make her lips look round and full. This will help support all of the other things we've done on her face. Now, Ankita has lovely pointed upper shape of her lips, so we're going to avoid any points or angles. We want to just use full rounded lines. I'm going to start with a liner pencil outside of her natural lip line, and I am going to draw in a rounded upper lip shape. Also, on her other side, we're going to try to match, and as I'm sure you all know, creating a completely symmetrical look is very difficult, just takes practice, and you just have to keep at it. So we have a nice rounded shape on her upper lip. Now we're going to do the same thing on the lower lip. Luckily, there is she has a lovely full lower lip as well, so this will give us lots of room to draw a wider lip. So we've got the outline. The next thing we're going to do, so she doesn't look like she has an outline, is we're going to blend the inner part of the lip, and she's going to hold her lips tight across her teeth with her mouth open. And you can see that I'm leaving the outer edge crisp and sharp. And I'm blending the inner line so that we don't have a very harsh, cartoony look. Now relax, and there we have that outline. Now I'm going to use a natural lip color. And again, depending on the makeup that you're doing and your choices, you might have a brighter makeup color. Right now we're doing just a natural color. I'm going to follow the lip line that I've drawn in. And if Ankita, if you would tighten your lips across your teeth, that's great. I'm going to follow that line and fill it in. I think I want to go a little bit darker in the color, so I'm actually going to take something a little bit oranger, which I think will contrast against Ankita's skin very nicely. This way you can see a little more clearly how full I've made her lips. Some of your makeup kits will have 2 different lip and cheek colors, so you have something to choose from. You can also use a cosmetic lipstick if you're going for a particular look. Okay, now relax your lips and let me just finish. Now I'm using this oranger color. Now this is a rounded lip shape, Ankita. If you want something to show up a little stronger, you might use a darker color, but I'm going to show you a little trick for making a more neutral color stand out. If you take your highlight and you paint it right up against the lip shape that you have drawn and painted in, you can see how that lip color stands out. But you want to pull away as much of it as possible and keep that sharp edge. I'm using my non-latex sponge. You can use your brush, but because I've put so much on, I think I need to pull off a little more than normal. So you can see the difference between the top lip and the bottom lip. The bottom lip sticks out a little bit more than the top lip because I've put a highlight right up against it. Now, if that shows a little more than you want it to, you can go back with your base color and paint that in over it. So here's Ankita's base color. I'm just going to touch it up a little bit, and I'm leaving just a little bit of that highlight showing. And what that does, it's going to really help pop out the lip color from her face. And there you can see Ankita with a very rounded face, a wide forehead, rounded nose, cheeks, chin, and very full lips.